Hey guys, this is George and I'm back with a new video. So I just read House of X number 5 of 6 and I think it kind of raises a lot of questions for me. So rather than giving kind of like a full review, I'm actually going to kind of talk about some issues that I have with this series. And I actually feel kind of dumb because I just made a video talking about how great the 5th issue was and how much I enjoyed it. And I think I still really enjoy this series, but I feel this series has kind of made me question the X-Men as they are. So I'm going to talk about this with you, and if you think it doesn't make sense, or you can let me know at the end of the video what you guys think. But I wanted to start with my first main issue with this series, House of X, Powers of X. And I think the main problems I guess the first of the problems that I have with this series is that one of them is the revelation of Moira MacTaggert being a mutant. Now, I like the way Hickman made it to where, you know, you'd never know she was a mutant because of her strange abilities, where she's kind of reborn having all of her memories. But to me, it takes away a lot from the character, because the X-Men, and it's going to go into more of what I've noticed with the series, but where are all the human supporting characters? It seems like we're losing a lot of human supporting characters, and Moira to me was actually one of my favorite, if not my favorite, human supporting character. I really liked how intelligent she is, you know, that she cares so much about the mutant race, and that she did so much to try and help the mutant race. Well, now if you strip that away, it's kind of like she's helping them because she is a mutant. And I think that's my main problem with it. It's probably the least of my problems with the series, because Jonathan Hickman makes it serve the story so well. But at the same time, it does bother me a lot, because it's one less important human character. And I don't know if it's me, but when I read the more recent comics, and I'm not talking about recent like this year, I'm talking about like over the past 5 years, it seems like the human supporting cast is less and less important, and even less and less there. If they are there, then they're probably going to be like enemies, and that kind of is going to tie into probably my most important problem with the series when we get to it. But that's the thing I wanted to start with. How do you all feel? I like it and I dislike it. I like it because Hickman pulls it off very well. If this was going to happen, it happened very well, and Hickman does pull it off in the story. But at the same time, I kind of wish it didn't happen, just because it's one less important human character. And it changes the history so much for the character, just because instead of her doing all of those altruistic things to help humanity as a human, to help mutant kind as a human, well, we end up discovering that she's a mutant. And so it's, even though she is still doing altruistic things, it's almost as if they're kind of negated somewhat, because instead of a human helping mutants, it's another mutant helping mutants. If that makes sense. So that's kind of one of the things that bothered me about this series. But at the same time, like I said, Hickman pulls this off so well in this story. It's really well done. So I think he deserves a lot of credit for that. The second thing that really bothers me about this series, and especially after reading House of X number 5 of 6, and I did hear people kind of talking about this in their videos, speculating that the X-Men would be resurrected somehow. House of X number 4 has basically the death of the X-Men, and I actually made a video talking about how incredible I thought that issue was, and now after reading this issue, I kind of feel like an idiot, because it really does negate everything that happened in that issue, and it bothers me a lot, not just because of that, but we'll talk more about House of X in a minute. But yes, in House of X number 4, the X-Men go on a suicide mission and they all die. And so in House of X number 5, we find out that they can be resurrected, that the mutants have this method of resurrecting other mutants. They're basically cloning the mutants and then copying their memories, or downloading their memories into the duplicate. And this kind of really bothered me a lot. It raises some questions too, not just the one about Wolverine, how do they get the adamantium back into his bones, but how many times has this been done? How many times have the X-Men died? And so this comic's kind of recent. This whole Krakoa thing is very recent. So I don't think it's happened that many times, but it seems like it's happened a few times. And so on the surface level, yes, it really cheapens the sacrifice that happened in House of X number 4. but at the same time, it just seems very odd to me. And kind of the dialogue from Storm and Xavier in this issue, it's just really creepy to me, and I just got these really odd vibes from this issue. And the issue I'm talking about, House of X number 5, where we're seeing these mutants resurrected, and then Storm proclaims to all of Krakoa that these are the mutants, and she goes through and she reintroduces them to make sure that all of Krakoa knows that these are the mutants, even though they're duplicates. And it seems just so odd to me, the way she talks in the issue, and it's going to lead into kind of my next kind of dislike of what's going on. But these characters seem very militarized, almost cult-like, and it seems really odd to me. It doesn't seem right. And so that's what I'm kind of wondering what you guys think, because I'm wondering myself, am I looking too much into this? Is it just me, or are others kind of seeing these things that strike me as odd? Because the dialogue in the issue, especially Storm's never been like a militarized cult-like person, but she sounds like in this issue like she's been drinking the Kool-Aid. And when I try and understand why these characters are behaving in this way, it kind of makes sense. I mean, they're all unified now. Magneto and Xavier, they've set aside their differences, they're together. Apocalypse actually ends up coming to the island, and it's not just Apocalypse, it's some of the X-Men's other villains. Or I guess there's kind of a lot of things. I mean, Xavier and Magneto, yes, they're unified, but they're also crossing kind of a strange line that I don't think they would cross. And so that's what I'm wondering. Is it just me, or is this exactly what would happen? And we'll get some more on that in a minute. But Apocalypse has now joined the island, and he and some of the others, I thought I saw Implate there. I saw Marrow. And then in the previous issue, I think it was Powers of X, they actually end up going to Mr. Sinister and recruiting Mr. Sinister to assist in their grand plan. And so there's a lot of kind of strange things, and I'm just wondering like how much they've changed, how far they've come from where they started. Now I get the part where they're willing to kind of accept all mutants and such, and I even get the part where Apocalypse kind of praises them. There's in House of X number 5, Apocalypse arrives on the island, Magneto and Wolverine confront him, and they're like, hey, you gonna start any trouble here? And Apocalypse is like, no, you finally reached the place where I've always wanted you to be, and I don't have any problems with you. In fact, I'm joining you. I'm one with you. And I thought that was interesting, and that actually does make sense to me, because Xavier and Magneto and the X-Men, they're unified, and it makes sense. They seem to be at the peak of their potential in my eyes, and I guess in Apocalypse's eyes too. But it's just, something just doesn't seem right to me, especially the duplication process. It not only does it cheapen the death, now it cheapens death going forward. And they've talked about that. They're actually going to try and bring back even more dead mutants. And so I get that. If you have that ability, I guess you would use it, and it makes sense. But it just seems very odd to me. And I think it is affecting the overall narrative of the X-Men. But I guess the most important thing, the thing that I have the most problem with, and I've kind of been touching on this, is that in my eyes, the X-Men seem like they no longer believe in peaceful coexistence. Not just the X-Men, but specifically Charles Xavier. And I know that he's not exactly Charles Xavier, he's kind of part Phantom X, but I guess the way it's being read, this is Xavier, this is his will, this is him. And so to me, the narrative of this story and Powers of X, and the way it seems like the way things are going to happen going forward, is that the dream for peaceful coexistence is done, and Xavier's way past that, and now he's going to do anything he can to preserve the mutant race. And I get that, but that seems more like, one of the things I loved about Charles Xavier is that he had hope, and he fought for that hope. He put everything he had into that hope. And one of the things I really disliked about the treatment of the character over the past few years is that they've really gone away from that. They've really tried to plant the seeds that Xavier isn't this altruistic person, but I think at his core he really is an altruistic person. To believe that, to really fight for that, it takes a lot to try your best to hold back and to not just hate somebody for hating you. And I think that's what Stan Lee and Jack Kirby were going for. I think he's actually mentioned that. I attended a Comic-Con where he spoke, and I think he did say that, and I think he said that in interviews. But his main purpose for these characters was to highlight Xavier as being an allegory for Martin Luther King, and Magneto being an allegory for Malcolm X. And the difference being, if you're not sure about that, is that Malcolm X is more of the militant, do whatever it takes. Martin Luther King Jr. is for a nonviolent unification, and he wants peaceful coexistence. And for me, that's something I've always respected. And I always thought, like with Martin Luther King Jr. and Professor X, that yeah, they can hit back, but they use restraint because, you know, they're trying to do something more, because they feel like they can get past that and they want to unify. And I think that message is kind of gone from the X-Men series. From what I've been reading, and even though I'm enjoying these series, it kind of, I guess, disheartens me a little bit that I feel like the core message of the X-Men is gone. So yeah, it's a really cool story, but I feel like the core message of the X-Men is gone. I guess the thing that kind of strikes me as odd is I don't know where it's going from here. It honestly seems like they're going in that direction of more militant, more cult-like, that mutants cannot coexist with humans. And that's kind of what I was touching on when I was talking about Moira. It's one less human character who has a major impact, who cares about mutants. I mean, yes, yes, Professor X and the X-Men care about humans, but it was good to see that there are good humans out there who want to coexist with the X-Men, with mutant kind, and there's one less of them, and that's why that also bothers me so much. It's one less important human character in the X-Men mythology. To me, it drives the point home that they are getting away from peaceful coexistence, and that it's all or nothing. And it makes sense. We've seen the future. We know that there are humans who are going to keep trying to hurt the X-Men. So in the grand scheme of things, it makes sense that the X-Men would kind of go forward with this mentality of, you know, protecting mutant kind at all costs. And that makes sense to me. It's just, it bothers me that the original message seems like it's gone. Because I'm sure Charles, who's able to read minds, the minds of everybody, even when he's not trying to, his mind is touching other people's thoughts. And he feels this hatred. He's always probably felt this hatred. And yet he still chose to pursue the peaceful path, non-aggressive, peaceful coexistence. And now it seems like that's out the window, that Xavier's going to do whatever it takes. And that's noble in its own right, but at the same time, it almost betrays the original character in my eyes. But then again, we have years of growth, years of changes. Maybe it's time Xavier's finally seen that. Maybe he actually believes it himself, that there is no peaceful coexistence, that either mutantkind's going to survive or mankind's going to wipe it out, and he needs to join forces with people who are his enemies. And the X-Men kind of have to become this more militant, cult-like group in order to persist and survive. Even though it does bother me, I do kind of understand that too. So I've been reading comics for a long time, and I know the thing that we all go back to is that don't worry about it so much. Nothing that changes is ever going to be permanent. It's always going to revert back to its original state. And so when I think that way, yeah, it's probably not that big of a deal. But my only thing is, that's almost entirely true, especially in comics, except for whenever major stories are told. And by that, I mean like Walt Simonson's Thor run. The thing that really comes to my mind when I think of a story writer, someone who can impact, and I want to give credit to artist Frank Catelli also, but Grant Morrison's new X-Men run. I always go back to this as one of my favorite comic books of all time. After that comic came out, everything changed, and we're still feeling the effects of that run in comics today. And the same thing said for Chris Claremont's X-Men run with John Byrne. I mean, we still have Days of Future Past, Giant Size X-Men, so there's so much there. And so those things change the status quo permanently, and so now we don't go back from there. You know, Colossus still around, Wolverine's still around. Wolverine's still an X-Man. He didn't just end up being an Incredible Hulk supporting character. He literally, from Giant Size X-Men #1, became an X-Man from that point forward. Yeah, we still see him in Incredible Hulk books, but he's an X-Man through and through. And like with the Grant Morrison run, after that run came out, everything changed. And so for Jonathan Hickman, he's such a prolific writer. The thing that a lot of people come back to is Jonathan Hickman's runs on Fantastic Four and the Avengers. That level of storytelling impacted those stories so much that they're forever going to be changed. And so when I think of Powers of X and House of X, I feel like if his level of storytelling keeps continuing on that path the way it's going now, it's going to end up being considered one of those. I don't want to get ahead of everything, but I feel that it has the potential, and it may already be fulfilling that potential, of becoming legendary status, like a Grant Morrison X-Men run, Chris Claremont X-Men run. And so when those things happen, those things can and do affect the status quo. So let's say this does end up happening, it comes to pass, and we don't go back from there. Some of these things, I mean, I don't know how I feel about them. And I don't know if that's just me being a fan, kind of grumpy with changes that I might not appreciate or like that much, or if it is a genuine concern that it literally is changing what the X-Men stand for and what they mean. But I'd like to know what you guys think. I mean, am I exaggerating? Am I going too far? Am I over the top? Or do you think there is some argument to be made that this story could potentially, for better or worse, it's going to have a lasting impact on the X-Men? And that's why I'm making this video, which I call Problems of X. These are the issues that I'm seeing. These are the problems that I'm seeing with this overall story. Even though I am enjoying it and I do see a lot of really cool things in this story, those core things seem to bother me because it seems like it fundamentally changes the X-Men. And that's why I want to know what you guys think. Jonathan Hickman's fantastic. I love all of the ideas on display in this story, and Jonathan Hickman deserves all the credit for that because it's so fantastic, so well thought out. I mean, who would have thought of to come up with a whole language for mutants? Jonathan Hickman would. But I'd like to know what you guys think. Do you actually see what I'm seeing at all? Or do you think this is kind of like, it doesn't matter because all that matters is the survival of mutants? And that does make sense too. I mean, Xavier's thrown his hat in. He's tried to be part of the side of coexistence, and now he's kind of, it doesn't seem like that. It seems like he's willing to do whatever it takes. And to me, that's not the Xavier that I know. But I know a lot of people are enjoying this series, and I am too, but like I said, I do have some problems with it. And I'd love to know what you guys think. Let me know in the comments section. If you like comic book content like this, subscribe for more. Leave a like if you liked the video, share it if you loved it, and as always, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.